Hello everyone! I finally wanted to review this controller for a while, and today I finally got my hands on it. This is the Machenike G5 Pro V2 Premium Edition. It's the successor for the G5 Pro and G5 Pro Max. Following with the unboxing, let's take a quick look at the manual. In the box you get 2 extra pairs of sticks with different heights. Here's the dock for the controller, a 2.4 GHz dongle, a USB Type-C cable, no brand and not braided, and the controller. And you also get these stickers to put under the faceplate. And that's it, there's nothing more. Ergonomically, the G5 Pro V2 is the exact same of the previous version. But the back buttons have been redesigned. There's also trigger stops now. And on the top you have 2 extra shortcuts and a pairing button. And the new colors looks awesome. It's a golden black design which will get less dirty. As you can see on the white version, the sticks are starting to become yellow. On the first version, the back buttons could only get pressed at an angle. This wasn't bad, it was something that you could get used to, and it's actually pretty good to avoid accidental presses. But it wasn't very popular, and now it's fixed on the V2 to be pressed at any angle. And the back buttons now are much easier to press. The shortcuts on the top are very nice and responsive. And the placement is perfect too. The trigger stoppers are just stoppers. There is not a mechanical click response here. On the original, the face buttons used mouse switches. They had a good travel distance and won't sink flat with the shell. And the same quality is maintained on the G5 Pro V2, but the buttons this time uses optical switches, and the click is much less pronounced. They're only optical on the face buttons. The D-pad uses regular clicky switches. And on the V2, the D-pad is a bit harder to press than the original. In my opinion, the original had the perfect resistance, and now on the V2 it feels a bit less comfortable. The menu buttons have the same switches. On the original, the sticks had a metal shaft. It also had anti-friction rings and Hall effect sensors from K-Silver. Now on the V2 it still has the metal shaft and anti-friction rings, but if you take a look inside, you see the new hot swappable modules from K-Silver. These are removable Hall effect stick modules. And if you look closely, you will see that there is an internal restriction for the analog sticks. On the original version there was just a hole and the sticks went all the way in. This means that with the internal restriction, the sticks won't touch the anti-friction rings. This put these sticks in the same category as the Vader 4 Pro and the Beitong Zeus 2. This is a new trend in the market and I'm very happy to see other companies doing this, because with this, the sticks feels amazing. These modules are removable, but they didn't include a tool to remove them in the box, so I'll have to improvise here. I'd also like to point that the Premium Edition does not include any extra modules, even though they show these new modules in the marketing. The included ones are the standard modules in the orange color, and you have 2 lighter and 1 heavier. Since they must be purchased separately, I won't be able to test them today. And here's how they look. Personally, I love the design and color. And the best thing about them is that not only you can customize the tension, but if you have problems with your stick, you can just replace them. And speaking about the tension, they're a bit lighter than the original K-Silver modules. I don't have the proper tools to test them, but with the precision scale, you can see that there is a difference. In my opinion, they're just perfect. They're slightly more loose than the original modules. Another detail is that the top right corner here has this small cut so that you insert the stick only in the right way. But because of this cut, you will feel a slight bump in the stick when you spin it in a circle. It is a very tiny bump, it's barely noticeable, but after using the Vader 4 Pro and the Zeus 2, I couldn't help but notice this. Speaking about the triggers, they feel a bit worse. They don't feel as smooth as the original, and it feels like there are plastic parts rubbing inside. But on the V2, the triggers are optical triggers and they use a different technology. We'll see that in the teardown. And to give you an idea of how they feel, take a look at the sound test. Speaking about the RGB lights, this is another letdown. The original controller was bright and shiny. It looked incredible, but now the lights are way dimmer. It still looks pretty cool, but it doesn't have the same impact as the first one. Of course, the brighter lights means that it will drain more battery, but you can reduce the brightness level. And the lowest brightness in the original is now the maximum brightness on the V2. And the lowest brightness on the V2 is barely visible. To compensate for that, it adds a few new light modes. Also, in the first one, you had 4 profiles, and you could assign a different color for each one. And now you have just one profile. Pressing function and down and up on the D-pad, you can adjust the vibration intensity. And these 4 LEDs here will represent the battery level in real time. Testing on the Nintendo Switch, it can wake up the console. And it has gyro controls. And the function button now can take snapshots and videos. But there is a bug and the wake up function doesn't work always. Sometimes you will just press the button and the switch won't wake up. Fixing this is simple though, you just have to flip the switch back and forth. Taking a look at the dock, it is very light, with almost 110 grams. There is a pass-through port and you can connect the dongle and leave it there. The dock has the same light effects as the controller. And when you connect the controller, it will sync with the dock and display the light modes in the same way. And pushing the button lets you change between the modes. When you remove the controller from the dock, it will turn on and pair automatically. Testing on PC, the sticks has no cardinal snapping. They have a small dead zone in the center. And the circularity is perfect. Also testing the stick resolution, it shows around 500 steps. And the results are about the same as the Vader 4 Pro. The triggers are analog triggers, and with the trigger stoppers, they become digital triggers. The D-pad diagonals are very easy to hit, and the input is pretty consistent. There is also a center pivot preventing you from hitting all 4 directions. I mentioned that there are dead zones on the sticks, but if you press and hold the 2 sticks for 5 seconds, you can remove the dead zones entirely. If you press and hold the 2 sticks and press the function button, you can change the circularity test for a slightly bigger range on the diagonals. Pressing function and the left stick enables the mouse mode. And pressing function and the right stick enables the simulated gyro. Pressing function and any of the shortcut buttons lets you remap any button. And you can also record macros. The function button combined with the face buttons, triggers, or D-pad allows you to enable turbo. And you may have noticed that the layout is in the switch mode, right? But if you hold A and the function button, you can swap to the Xbox layout. Holding down the 2 triggers and pressing function lets you change between the trigger vibration modes. But I tested the feedback of the triggers in game and it doesn't work. I also found a problem with the back buttons. The switches for the shortcut buttons are very bad and low quality. When you slowly release the button, the switches will lose responsiveness before the button unclicks. This doesn't happen in the original G5 because the switches are higher quality. And this won't happen with the face buttons because the switches here are optical switches. The D-pad switches are also of a higher quality. On the shutter buttons and shortcuts of the top, this won't happen as much. Another slightly annoying issue is that I have the switch mode as the default layout here. I can use the button combination to change the layouts, but when I unplug the controller and plug it back again, it will be back to the switch layout. The only way you can make permanent changes is by using the Key Linker app on the smartphone. And only here you can remap any button you want, adjust the dead zones and curves of the sticks, change the trigger configurations, adjust the vibration intensity, edit the turbo speed, record macros, and change the color of the lights. And this is the only way you can configure the controller. The Machenike software on PC is not compatible with the G5 Pro V2. Moving to the teardown, we have 4 hexagonal screws under the faceplate. Then there's 2 clips on each side. Here we can see the back shell and the construction of the back buttons. The trigger stopper seems pretty thick and durable. And these pogo pins makes contact with the motherboard. Here we can see the mechanism for the triggers. And indeed, it's something completely different. There are many moving plastic parts and they're all in contact with each other. And here we can see the switches for the back buttons. I don't know which brand are these, but they're not good. They're pretty famous for becoming unresponsive on other electronics and other video game controllers. They should have stuck with the same switches of the original G5 Pro. And the same kind of switches are present on the shortcuts of the top. The shutter buttons are slightly different though. Taking a look at the battery, it has 600 milliamps, the same as before. And here's the optical sensors for the triggers. It is well lubed, and the triggers will push a plastic piece into the sensor, and then the optical sensor will read the distance. Here's a cool close-up of the dampening rubbers of the shutter buttons. In the front shell, the layout of the face buttons is fixed. And on the other side, we can see the membranes for the D-pad and face buttons. Also, the triggers have metal pivots, which is pretty good. Here's a closer look at the switches. Moving to the optical switches, just by looking at them, you can see that they're indeed optical. The sensor is on one side, and you have nothing on the other side. I cannot see the brand. And if you look on the other side, you'll see that they're attached to the motherboard by these clips. If you remove them, you can lift up the switch and see the mechanism that blocks the light. And finally, we have some test pads for the face buttons. I tried to perform a lag test by connecting a wire to these pads, but the GPDL didn't recognize it. But checking the Gamepad LA website, we can see that someone was able to test it, and the results for a wire connection in X input mode is of about 4 milliseconds of input delay. That is faster than the Vader 4 Pro. So I performed the lag test in the old-fashioned way with a slow-mo camera, and the results are indeed true. And here's my final thoughts about this controller. I'll start with what I don't like. First, the back buttons are just terrible. They're unresponsive and you must constantly push them really hard. If you slightly release the button, you will lose the input before the button unclicks. And this is very annoying, especially if you are using the back buttons as a run button. It will suddenly stop running and the button is still clicked in. Second, the firmware is a bit glitchy. The vibration of the triggers does not work properly. Sometimes the wake up function on the Switch does not work, and when you swap between Xbox and Switch layouts, the settings are not saved, unless you manually change them under the app. Speaking about the app, you only have a smartphone app now. The PC app is not compatible with the V2. The triggers are optical, but they feel worse than the Hall effect triggers. The Hall effect triggers are smooth and reliable. I'm not sure why they changed to optical and what kind of advantages the optical triggers has, but if it ain't broken, don't fix it. The same thing applies for the D-pad. The original D-pad was just perfect, and they changed the resistance of the membranes, making it a bit harder to use. And I wish the RGB lights were just as bright as the original. Lastly, you don't get any additional modules for the analog sticks. It's a huge selling point that you can swap the sticks and change the resistance, but you have to buy them separately. And this is the premium edition. You're paying more just to get the dock and a different color. Now for the good things about this controller. Even though the D-pad is harder to press, it still performs pretty well. The face buttons and analog sticks are amazing. The sticks are hot swappable, has a high resolution, and are super smooth. And the face buttons uses optical switches and are super fast and responsive. They finally added shortcuts on the top, which is my favorite place for shortcuts in controllers. And unlike the Vader 4 Pro and the Beitong Zeus 2, the usability is pretty good. You can easily remap buttons, activate turbo, or program macros on the go. This controller has a super low input lag, being faster than the Vader 4 Pro. And there are trigger stoppers now, which is a bonus. And that's it for this review. The G5 Pro V2 could be a strong contender for Controller of the Year, but it lacks the polish of other brands like 8BitDo, FlyDigi, and GameSir. And what are your thoughts on the Machenike controllers? Leave your opinions in the comments. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.